So today is spoken to my 60s generation, Michael W. Smith and James Taylor, and my favorite, John Denver. Wow, awesome. Many of you who know my husband, Eric, know that he is a plain nut. No, not P-L-A-I-N, nut. Well, maybe. But no, he's an airplane nut. He knows all things aircraft, and he loves that show, Why Planes Crash. It's on the Weather Channel. Yes. The show covers plane crashes from various times and places, and it lets the viewer in on the crash itself, complete with state-of-the-art recreations and visuals of the crash, and interviews of the people, if there were any, who survived. And it also tells about the investigative findings. We have a really exciting life when Planes Crash is on, I'm telling you. Sometimes they include voice recordings from the black boxes, and you can hear the last moments before the crash and the exclamations of the pilots. These are words that are deep within the soul, without intention or thought, and they usually include words like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." Now, because these words are spoken without deliberate purpose and without consideration of a hearer, they express a person's profound horror. In fact, the situation in this situation, "oh my God," is really not intended to refer to any God or any belief. It's an expression of feeling. Conversely, if you go to an art museum or our botanical gardens or someplace awe-inspiring with incredible views of nature, you might hear people exclaim, "How magnificent!" They're not speaking with words about God, but their words evoke a certain element of religious awe. The fact is that human experience cannot be easily expressed in words. We sometimes invoke God's name when we really aren't making a statement at all that pertains to God. And often we express our thoughts without saying a word about holiness, but we're speaking of some holy, sacred experience we have had. So today we're continuing our sermon series using the articles from the Fourth R, the magazine which is published by the same group that started the Jesus Seminar. And the article I'm sharing with you today is by James Feist. It's entitled, "Is God Real?" Next week we'll conclude our series, and it is about an atheist's 10 suggestions. So invite people to come and hear that one. According to the polls, there's about a 50-50 chance that you have had at least one spiritual experience, an overpowering feeling that you've touched God or another dimension of reality. I won't ask you to show hands, but I'm guessing that more than 50% of you have had that religious experience. So, have you ever wondered whether those encounters actually happened or whether they're kind of in your head? Scientists actually say that the answer might be it's both. If you're looking for evidence that religion is just manufactured by your brain, you need to look up Jeff Schimmel. He was a 49-year-old Los Angeles writer, and he was raised in a conservative Jewish home. He never bought into the whole God thing until after he says he was touched by a being outside of himself. "Yeah," he says, "I was touched by a surgeon." About a decade ago, Schimmel had a benign tumor removed from his left temporal lobe. The surgery was actually easy, but soon after that, unknown to him, he began to suffer many seizures, and he would hear conversations in his head, sometimes around him, People would look slightly unreal, as if they were animated. And then he started having visions. He remembers 2 different times lying in bed. He looked at the ceiling, and there was a swirl of blue and gold and green colors that gradually settled into a shape, and he couldn't figure out what it was. And then, like a flash, it dawned on him. It was Mary, the mother of Jesus. And he said, it was funny. I laughed about it. Because why would Mary, the mother of Jesus, appear to me, a Jewish guy, lying in a bed, looking at the ceiling? I didn't even believe in God. Mary could have done much better than me. So Shmuel became fascinated with spirituality. And as he became more compassionate and less ambitious. And he wondered, could his new outlook have to do with something in his brain surgery? On his next visit to the neurologist, he asked to see his most recent MRI and compare it to the one before his surgery. And he said, my left temporal lobe looked completely different from the way it did before surgery. Gradually, it had become smaller and changed its shape, and it was covered with scar tissue. And those changes were responsible for sparking the electrical firings in his brain. So last week, Paul and I attended a workshop at Phillips Theological Seminary about how the brain works, and specifically how worship and ritual affect your brain. Did you know it did? One of the speakers, David Hogue, said, and I quote, "Our brains react similarly in our connection with others as they do when we contemplate God." Think about that for a moment. The same change in your brain happens when you interact with others as it does when you contemplate God. Spirituality, after all, serves a vital human purpose. Now, you'll be really happy that you got out of bed on a cold morning like today and came to church, because numerous studies show that religious belief is medically and psychologically, not to mention socially, beneficial. Reports that churchgoers live longer, 7 years longer, than people who don't go to church. They also have lower blood pressure. We recover quicker from cancer. We have better outcomes from coronary disease and rheumatoid arthritis. We're less likely to have children with meningitis. And patients who have a strong intrinsic faith, meaning a deep personal belief, not just a social inclination to go to a place of worship, recover 70% faster from depression than those who are not deeply religious. I mean, are you excited? You all are healthy, healthier than your compatriots. Several brain researchers believe that religiosity is linked to dopamine activity in the prefrontal lobes of our brain. They studied nuns and Buddhist monks and found that when religion is operating the way it should, it strengthens our prefrontal lobes, which help inhibit impulses in our lives better. So in other words, religious activities such as prayer and ritual and abstaining from excessive alcohol except on Super Bowl Sunday strengthen the ability of our frontal lobes to control primitive impulse. Additionally, religions give our followers the benefits of a supportive social network, and since research has shown a lack of social contact can be more harmful to health than obesity and alcoholism and even smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Wow. Being part of a group is very important psychologically. So, back to the question of the day, is God real? And how can we prove it? Much of the wisdom in our Bible actually presents people's experiences of God, not necessarily God's activity, but the experiences. So Adam and Eve, as you may remember, experienced God in a garden. And Moses reports a time when he heard a voice of God coming from a burning bush. And Abraham meets God in 3 unexpected visitors when he entertained them. And the prophets spoke about God's anger and God's plan for the future. And Jesus preached about how humanity could bring change to a better day, a better way of relating to each other, to bring about God's kingdom. And then Paul reported a vision and a new life direction because of a mysterious light on the way to Damascus. We know God through experience. And often we find out that language does not adequately describe those experiences. Instead, we use metaphor and simile and story and hyperbole to tell about the experiences. And likewise, our brains and our body indicate these changes when we have a spiritual experience. So we can name and attribute those experiences to God. But my question for you is, what if God is the experience? What if God is the relationship? What if God is the energy, the love, the bond of spirit in these experiences? I believe that one of the most modern mistakes of Christians is to treat our beliefs as superior and then discount our experiences. What we experience of God is vital because we cannot know God with certainty, only with faith. It's critical that our sacred experience is central in forming our beliefs. The experience comes before the belief. So back to the question, is God real? I would suggest that God is as real as our experiences of God. Or to say it succinctly, God is as real as love. Love, like God, is an experience. It's difficult to prove that love exists on a strictly intellectual level, but it's a regular part of our experiences. We know that love is real because we have been loved and we love. We know that God is real because we have felt a sacred experience. We've known something beyond our own selves. When we look at the Bible, we can confirm this. Before he was Paul, who was one of the main founders of the early church, his name was Saul. And he had a profound experience of God on the road to Damascus. And this experience changed his life and his name. After the experience, he was fully committed to teaching other people about Jesus and leading them into the church community. So here's an excerpt of his experience from Acts 9. It's also printed in the bulletin. Now, as Paul was going along and approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground, and he heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and you will be told what you are to do." Now, from that day on, the rest of the story, Paul taught and he preached and he led people to God. He traveled all around the Middle East. He was imprisoned multiple times for his work, yet he drew on that one experience of light and a voice from heaven for the rest of his life. It gave him strength when he faced adversity. It gave him hope when there was no hope. It gave him the power to sing while he was in prison. It led him into passionate belief. He kept on going until he too was martyred for what he believed from that one experience. So let me ask you, have you had an experience that taught you or led you or helped you and gave you belief? Have you had a moment of serenity when you were going through a time of hopelessness? Have you stopped and meditated and then found a new truth? Have you paused to consider the splendor of the earth? Have you been touched by the purity of a child speaking the whole Christian story? Have you experienced the miracle of healing? Have you felt a strong bond with a friend or several friends that cannot be severed by distance or by time? I had a friend call me. She and I had 3 children in 4 years, each of us. So when we got together, 4 adults, 6 children, 4 and under. It was not a spiritual experience. But they moved 25 years ago to North Carolina, and we keep in touch. Last week she called me and she said, Randy and I were thinking about all those Sunday afternoons we got together with our 6 little kids, and we shared a beer and a few laughs. It saved our lives, Robin, she said. And I said, I remember. I remember. That bond of friendship that is sacred 25, 30, 50 years after it happened, that's a holy experience. Has your heart been strangely warmed by an invisible yet palpable presence? Have you been loved, or have you loved? If you've had any of these or other experiences, then you know that God is real. Amen.